Get ready. You are about to experience the life science effect. The most influential players in biotech, pharma, and medical device, bringing you their insights and inspirational stories. Are you ready to boost your career? Ready to set your medical innovation in motion? You have arrived at the right place. Every week, another industry leader, more insights, more inspiration, and tips you can implement right away to make your mark on the world. Welcome to the show. I'm here with Matt Dressler and Rick Ditto. How about you guys just give me a quick intro, who you are, what you do, and what life is for you.
So my name is Rick Ditto. Matt and I both work in Johnson & Johnson, and in a past role, I actually reported directly to Matt. So we've got a good history together. I'm formally trained as a biomedical engineer and have a master's degree there, and I'm pursuing another graduate degree to support kind of my current role, which is in health economics and outcomes research. So I work for Ethicon, which is a subsidiary of Johnson & Johnson. I'm based in Cincinnati, and I would say 90% of my remit is supporting Verb Surgical, which is the Google J&J partnership to build a digital surgery platform. Really, trying to take a transformational leap up in the way that we perform surgery and trying to provide surgeons and staff with unique insights about how we can treat, the next patient better.
Thanks, Rick. Hey, Matt, how about you?
Yeah, cool. Thanks. Yeah, I'm Matt Dressler. Also with Johnson & Johnson, DePuy Synthes, joint reconstruction based out of Warsaw, Indiana. I've been there about 11 years. Trained as a biomedical engineer. My graduate research done at University of Cincinnati is in tissue engineering, but since coming over to Warsaw, I've been focused more on joint recon, and for the past 6 years, been thinking about digital tools to help with the surgery. So this similar to Rick working in Verb Surgical. I'm not working in Verb Surgical, but this idea of how do we introduce digital tools to improve surgery.
Verb Surgical. What's that word you're saying? Is that a brand? Is that a company name? What is it?
Yeah, so there's the partnership with Google and J&J has involved the creation of a separate independent company. Okay. So it is called Verb Surgical. I would invite show guests to go on the website and look at all the publicly available materials. It's still pretty highly confidential, so we can talk about high-level trends and macro trends, but obviously don't.
What's the website?
So I believe it's verbsurgical.com. And if you type in Verb Surgical, you'll find plenty of information on the web.
Well, that's pretty exciting. You had asked before we started recording, is there a theme? It's funny how lately a theme seems to be developing. When I was talking with some of the guys at Indiana Biosciences Research Institute, just this whole idea of tech getting into the big tech companies are getting into the healthcare space. And one of the questions that Reiner Fisher asked at a recent talk was, how do we innovate, or how do we collaborate like tech? And what are the challenges with doing that? So I guess my question, without me knowing it, and by now everybody knows I'm not well prepared today, but I feel like I suddenly just got well prepared, because when you say Google and J&J, I get excited, because what I've been asking lately is, do we need to figure out how to collaborate like tech, or does tech need to figure out how to work in the life science space, or is there some combination of both? So now Google and J&J together, what's going on there?
So I think it's a little bit of both. I think that big tech has a lot of capabilities that we are trying to build in med tech and pharma, but I think the big tech firms realize that we have a really long clinical history, and we've built sales and marketing and distribution channels that would be quite costly for them to stand up. And so taking our decades, and in the case of Johnson & Johnson, right, over 130-year history of doing this, there's just a great legacy there that those companies would need to leverage. So, the way that I think, moving forward, right, as tech and life sciences start to collaborate more, it's going to be, I think open source models tend to win out in the future. And we've seen it in a lot of different industries. So if you think about it through the lens of like a hospital purchaser administrator, right, an economic buyer, sort of siloing yourself with one manufacturer, right? Or adopting a digital tool that then requires you to buy only one type of company's devices. It presents a challenge. And so the companies who I think will win will be the companies who can create ecosystems where other device manufacturers can play. And that's going to create the most value for providers and for patients and for those economic buyers that are gaining a lot more influence in the marketplace.
And I know you can't reveal anything proprietary, of course, but what's your specific role in all this?
Yeah, so supporting Verb, my role is to help our marketing and commercial counterparts sort of test their value proposition and shape our market access strategy globally and especially here in the U.S. With a variety of stakeholders. So I think traditionally, medtech has been very focused on the surgeon, right? And the surgeon has been the decision maker. Yeah. And healthcare budgets are constrained, and we could pull up all the numbers, but what's clear is that the macro trend is that these economic buyers and the value of real world data is only going to continue to increase. So I'm 33. I still have people ask me, hey, why did you leave R&D, this cool R&D role where you're working on digital tools to this health economics role? And the answer is really like, I've got to work for 30 more years. And so if I shoot at this macro trend, like these skills that I'm picking up today and in the support of Verb Surgical, like that's going to position me personally well for the future. And I think by building those skills, it allows me to make a bigger impact for Johnson & Johnson.
So in 30 years, you'll be 63. There will be no such thing as retirement by then. They're already. I'm turning 50 next year, and already I know there's no such thing as retirement. But fast forward 30 years, what does surgery look like in 30 years?
So I think that there's an opportunity. We always think that, and you'll hear it if you go look in the press and hear kind of futurist talk. And I'd say I'm a tech optimist, but I'm like a pretty pragmatic person, and I'm pretty well versed in machine learning and deep learning techniques, so I have a handle on what's possible. And so I think in 30 years we might see some subtask automation in the operating room, but it's not going to be like show me these robots to do surgery. So there are some things around patient education, right, where patients may not understand exactly what a surgical robot does. But I do think it's going to come down to some subtask automation, right? We could maybe suture some things together, maybe perform some simple tasks, but there's the risk tolerance, right? What if your model or your prediction is wrong, right? And you have a complication. And so we see it with driverless cars, right? So, in Pittsburgh at Carnegie Mellon, people were trying to train models using these things called neural nets, developed in the 70s and 80s to try to teach a car how to drive. That was in the early to mid 90s. Yeah. And we don't see these things as being ubiquitous. Right. I think of like Back to the Future 2, right? There's flying cars in 2015.
I want to go back to 2015. Right. That seems more fun.
Right. So it's 2018 now, and these predictions that we made in 1985, we don't have flying cars, and so we need to temper those expectations and think about the types of predictions that we want to make. Yeah. The way Matt and we can talk about the way that we approach sort of predictive modeling and some of the things that we've tried to pilot and build in our company. Maybe not the details, but at a higher level, like how do we think about those problems? How do we think about feature optimization? How might you conceptualize, right, building some sort of analytics capability into any business? Those are the types of things that I think we could talk about today that are fun.
So just some of the I think in 30 years, some of it depends on what we do with data. So data curation, data collection, the quality of the data, who has access to what kind of data. So I think particularly as a lot of the privacy concerns are out there, like as those things move forward, does that create silos between data? And then your ability to sort of do analysis is somewhat limited. Yeah. I think, as sort of a futurist and a technology optimist, you would like to have longitudinal data so that you can get a broader view of a patient, and then over time learn and be able to say something smart and do something better for the next patient. But I think that there's going to be challenges to that.
Do you guys know Dan Robertson at IBRI?
Only through your podcast.
So you got a chance to listen to that. I think you might want to meet him.
Yeah,
I'm sensing themes.
Sure.
With what you guys are saying.
Yeah.
I'm a casual observer of AI and machine learning and all that stuff. So that's why I had those questions for him about, where's AI headed? Why not just, I was joking with somebody. I said, if we want to go to Pluto, why don't we just tell an AI we want to go to Pluto, program in the laws of physics that we know about, and just, turn it loose, right? And I think that what I'm talking about there is probably more of a general intelligence question, whereas it seems like with what you're saying, like some very specific tasks, you can program a machine, or you can get an AI to figure that specific task out, drive a car even, maybe even pretty specific. Or as I'm seeing in cars these days, like if I'm about to hit something, brake at a controlled rate. It's not really driving the car, but it's doing some very specific tasks, right? So it sounds like that's kind of what you get, and that's what Dr. Robertson was saying on the last episode as well. So maybe some more general questions. You guys are in the medical device industry. You have been for a while. You could probably, as really smart engineers, and we talk about Google. You can move to Silicon Valley and work there. Why are you here in the Silicon Prairie doing medical devices? I didn't think of that term, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, so the reality of it is, so I work in Warsaw, Indiana, and it is, at one point there was 3 of the top 5 leading orthopedic companies in the world based out of Warsaw. Yeah. Recently, one bought the other, so now there's 2 of the top 4 based there. So I think, long story short, I think it is the center of the universe for orthopedics, joint reconstruction. So that's why I'm here.
Why life science specifically?
Yeah, so I think that's a longer story. I think, when I was a kid and an engineer, I think there was an aspiration to get into medicine. In college, I got the opportunity to play basketball, and some of those 8 a.m. or very early labs piled on top of practices wasn't really feasible. So I took a step back and did engineering instead of medicine.
What college did you play basketball?
Yeah, so University of Maryland, Baltimore County. It's obviously in Baltimore. Yeah. It got some recognition last year for being the first 16 seed to beat a 1 seed.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, that's right. That's.
You weren't on that team, though. You're not that young.
In spirit, yes. Yeah.
That's pretty exciting. Did you get to go to the game?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
I do like to tell myself that I laid the foundation for that. But
of course you did.
The reality, I don't know.
Of course you did. How about you, Rick? Why life science?
So life science, because I had a grandmother who had lupus her whole life and struggled through a lot, and I saw that she never complained, right? And doctors told her in the 50s that she would be unable to bear children, so she told them to get lost and had 5 children. Luckily, that trickled down, and I was able to be born. But seeing her struggle through a lot of stuff, you just want to help people like that. And I think a lot of people in life sciences can share similar stories. And I guess over time I've sort of realized, so I did engineering, and I'm not a bad engineer, but I realized some of my strength is in kind of continuous learning, right? So I have this appetite for learning to do new things, and also this appetite for connecting people and trying to think about how to make an impact in a bigger company. So why am I in the Midwest? My spouse is from here. Our folks are around, and so we want to stay near family. But also, right, this is the number 2 place in terms of life science exports. So there's a lot of opportunity. And I think, one other thing to touch on, I've worked in Fortune 50 companies. I've also, been the first employee at a seed stage startup. And so I've seen both sides of it. And I think while it's not always easy to work in a big company, you have, politics, budgets, you're a matrix. It's hard to find a true decision maker, an owner for certain things. I think the reason Matt and I are here is because if we can make a difference in Johnson & Johnson, and I kind of think we're on the right career path to do it. I think we've got some good opportunities ahead of us. You make a difference in Johnson & Johnson, you made a difference globally, right? You get plugged in directly to that sort of sales, marketing, distribution engine that I talked about earlier. And so that's why we're here, and that's why I think we feel pretty passionate about that cause.
So you've done a lot of different things. If you were advising a young Rick or a young Matt, what advice would you give yourself if you were starting again?
Yeah, I think I've heard it pretty consistently on this podcast, right? Don't be afraid. You're going to learn the most through your mistakes. And I think if you just shelter yourself from those opportunities, it's going to take you longer to get to where you want to go.
Yeah, absolutely can relate to that. I've made plenty of mistakes, and those are the times I've learned. Speaking of mistakes, I know we talk a lot about success, and you guys obviously have had some success. What's a project or something that happened that didn't go the way you wanted it to, and what did you learn from that?
So I think when you think about mistakes or failures, the the best, I guess I'll lump it into kind of the success conversation. The best opportunities are those where you've built a good network and you have a connection with someone who's willing to take a chance on you. And so as you get any opportunity or chance, and I've been really blessed with a lot of chances, it's then on you to work hard to make that thing happen. And so, I guess the times when I've probably slipped up is when I maybe don't understand like the strategic imperative of the thing I've been asked to do. It's not really clear what my remit is, right? Roles and responsibilities and remit. Or if I'm like a little timid, right? So like Matt said, if I'm not maybe ambitious enough with the thing that I've been asked to do. And so the things that end up then being successful is when someone takes a chance on you and asks you to do something and you just blow it out. You make it the best it can be. You go solicit advice from people all across the company, right? Really leverage the matrix, leverage the resources of your company. Don't be afraid to ask, really go above and beyond. And then I think there's a bit that I'm still trying to learn the nuances of, but it's trying to share out the great work that you did without sounding like you're bragging too much, right? Yeah. Really trying to share credit with everybody who helped you, who enabled you, right? Who gave you permission to maybe act in that way that maybe your other peers at your certain kind of title or level, weren't given that opportunity. So I guess maybe that indirectly answers your question, but it
does. Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that last part, especially my philosophy for years has been, any success I have was because the team stepped up, and sure. any failure is my responsibility. So at the same time, I take responsibility for success as well. My part as a leader, and one of the things we like to talk about on here is leadership. So as a leader, what characteristics is it about you that's allowed you to have success? So go ahead and take responsibility for a second for a success that you've had, and tell me, what is it about you, Matt, as a leader that's caused that success?
As Rick and I got to know each other, right, was the time that we were building the team in Warsaw to do some of this early work in digital surgery. And it's a different kind of work than has traditionally been done in Warsaw. And so we were really intentional and deliberate that we needed different skill sets. So we were thoughtful about what kind of capabilities we needed. We laid those out, and we then hired into them. Rick's told you a little bit about his experience in startups in the digital space, so that was one of the kinds of things we wanted to do. Yeah. We wanted mechatronics. We wanted some thought in Internet of Things, machine learning, and some of these emerging data analytics capabilities. And so when we hired, we were really, again, intentional not to clone ourselves. If there were 6 or 7 or me, like that wouldn't be very helpful. And so I was pretty pleased and excited when we were able to recruit that team. And we got a diversity of capabilities, but also part of what came along with it is we had like really diverse people, and it's pretty cool.
I understand that I've heard it from other people about the Warsaw area. It's hard to attract and retain talent, especially younger people that want to live in big cities. You found a compromise in Fort Wayne, which, by the way, I've been to Fort Wayne a few times. I think it has a lot of the things big cities have. So if anybody's looking to work in Warsaw, you can live in Fort Wayne. Matt will show you around. But so what kinds of things do you find that to be an issue, either Rick or Matt, in recruiting and retaining talent? And if not, what are you doing differently? And if so, what are you trying to do to stem that tide?
I think it's a challenge, and it's a challenge that I think all companies sort of struggle with. Is opportunities are a mouse click away. Yeah. Right. So salary data is published on the internet. True. Opportunities are a mouse click away, and all your college friends that are living in big cities are living their hashtag best life or whatever on Instagram. And so if you're in the small town, I do think there's a little bit that we faced in Warsaw, but the way that we combat it is by forming things like we've got a young professional employee resource group. So a group of millennials that this is one of these examples where I was asked to stand this up with a colleague. Yeah. And so we stood up the group. It's got 40 or 50 pretty engaged members. I'm now in Cincinnati, but that group's still running strong. So they hold kind of monthly happy hours. They do things in the community, right? Some community service, and so it's a way to try to create that that sort of social bond that, hey, we're in this together a little bit.
Yep.
And Chicago's only a couple hours away. So I know those folks, can come down to Indy, can go to Chicago for the weekend. So it's a way to just show people that, we're in this together and we're part of it, maybe a bigger purpose. And then there are also things that, out of the Lilly Endowment, right, through OrthoWorks, which I think is more supported by the local industry, although I haven't talked to them for several months. But there are sort of community-wide efforts. So the ortho cluster up there realizes that this is a challenge. So they've put out, some good collateral showing cost of living in the Warsaw area, right? The fact that you can, you can afford a lake house on an orthopedic salary. Yeah. If you get married to somebody else who works in orthopedics, you can afford a nicer lake house. Nice, so that there are great opportunities up there. And those are some of the ways, some of the tactics that we've used to combat it. But yeah, it is a bit of a challenge. But as we change the way we work, and we work in Johnson & Johnson, there are opportunities to collaborate with people that sit on other sides of the world. The team that Matt was talking about building, half of us were in Warsaw, half of us were in Leeds in the UK. So it's pretty interesting, right, that you can lead a team across the pond, and that we also have sites in Westchester outside of Philly. And then in Raynham, just, an hour south of Boston. So
just adding to that, in a real practical sense, I think part of what we want when we hire people is, passion and vision. And so we believe that, or I believe that in a professional sense. And so I think we're doing some pretty cool and amazing stuff with some potentially broad reach. But then also like personally. So the hardest thing is to get somebody on site. I think once somebody gets on site and they interact with the community that Rick talked about, but then also like what are some things that you're passionate about outside of work? There was one fella, it turned out it was fencing. And which sort of, okay. He hooked on in South Bend at the University of Notre Dame. They have a world-renowned fencing group. And in a way, it was better than where he left.
Yeah, right.
So I think just, having people that have passion, have vision, and finding out what those things and speaking into it professionally and also socially.
Yeah. Great. I think that's a good note to take a quick break on. And when we come back, I have a couple of questions that I didn't warn you about. And then we'll do a little rapid fire round. The Indiana Biosciences Research Institute is connecting the brightest minds and expertise from industry, academia, and the public sector to tackle diabetes, metabolic disease, and poor nutrition. Their motto is Discovery with Purpose, reflecting their commitment to the translation of scientific discovery into improved outcomes for patients here in Indiana and around the world. More at www.indianabiosciences.org. Welcome back. Talking with Rick, Ditto, and Matt Dressler. You mentioned Boston, and it reminded me of something we were talking about before we started recording, which is why should somebody from Boston listen to this little show in Indiana? We try to have global reach, and podcasts, of course, are global. It's the internet after all, right? But obviously a lot of the guests have been from the Midwest. So I'm from Boston. I'm a Patriots fan. I'm not. I'm pretending to be the guy.
Oh.
It hurt. It actually hurt to say that out loud. I felt weird saying that. But so let's say I am. I'll say I'm a Red Sox fan. How about that? Why would I listen to this little show from the Midwest?
So I think we mentioned it earlier, and it's a pretty startling number, even to the folks that live in the Midwest and Indiana. But Indiana, I believe, is the number 2 exporter of life science products in the U.S., second only to California. And so there's a lot going on here. And there are a lot of really strong legacy businesses. And so when you think about the tech scenes on the coasts, those technology products will likely enable better utilization, better use of those legacy platforms that exist within all these businesses. And so I think if you're thinking about an app, right, a life sciences app or some sort of digital solution, it's probably going to have to live in the ecosystem of some companies from Indiana in terms of the way that they sell and market and commercialize and distribute their products. So
Indiana, it would make sense to
Cincinnati,
it
would make sense to keep a finger on the pulse.
Yeah, absolutely. And having you here from Cincinnati is great because the Ohio Valley in general and the Great Lakes region, we're all pretty connected, and the what did you guys call it? The Silicon Prairie. I think I love that. I'm going to start using that. I'm going to pretend I thought of it. But absolutely, yeah. So if you're listening from you're on one of the coasts or you're in Boston or whatever, you probably want to keep an eye on and keep an ear on what's going on in the Midwest, because we're coming on strong. That having been said, let's do a little rapid fire round and then we'll wrap this thing up. All right. So here's how we'll do this. I'll ask one of you and then I'll ask the other one. So Matt, one principle you will never compromise.
Yeah, I think it's faithfulness, right? I'm going to be faithful to myself, faithful to my family, faithful to my colleagues, right?
That's great. Rick.
Mine is the pursuit of truth. So not running away from data, not running away from what may be true. And if I'm working on something and it's not the best way to do it, I'd like to know that sooner rather than later before I'm disrupted.
Matt, what's one thing every aspiring leader should stop doing? Like right now.
Yeah, I think it's exactly that. Take a list of what you're doing and figure out what you should stop doing so that you can continue to say yes to good things.
Rick, what's one thing every aspiring leader should stop?
I believe it's that Eisenhower matrix, right? And just trying to figure out what you can delegate, right? What is neither urgent nor important. We tend to fill our schedules and fill our calendars, and that doesn't provide us enough time to think.
Aside from listening to every episode of The Life Science Effect, what's one thing every leader should start doing today? Matt.
Yeah, so I enjoy the HBR Idea Cast. That's a good podcast.
Idea Cast.
Yeah.
And in fact, that answers the next question, which was an online resource. So that's good. So listen to more podcasts and the HBR Harvard Business Review, right? HBR Idea. I don't listen to that one. I'll have to start. And Rick, what's one thing everyone should start doing today?
So yeah, the question says aspiring leader. And so I think if you're an aspiring leader, you should take an inventory of macro trends and the skills that you need to lean into them.
Okay. What's an online resource, Rick?
I have a pretty young family and I'm also in graduate school, so I don't have a lot of time to do reading, so I do a lot of listening. So one good tip is to listen at 1.5 times the speed of the podcast.
Yeah.
It's better for your commute. So some good podcasts. Masters of Scale by Reid Hoffman, How I Built This with Guy Raz, Freakonomics with Stephen Dubner, the HBR Idea Cast that Matt mentioned. Another one that's good is Conversations with Tyler. So that's Tyler Cowan, who's an economist at George Mason.
I think I listened to 2 of those. So that's good. 2 out of 4 is not bad, right? And you said you don't get much time to read, but what is there a book that you've read before that's had a huge impact on your professional life?
As a tech optimist, and sometimes maybe a bit of a futurist, the thing that really helps bring me back to earth is the book Crossing the Chasm, which is a really, I think, like a fundamental book in marketing. And it really lays out 5 different customer segments. So you have tech enthusiasts, visionaries, and those tend to make up your early adopters, 10 to 20% of your market. Mm-hmm. And then the laggards, or maybe not laggards, but the mainstream market are, your pragmatists, your conservatives, and your skeptics. And so, I'm an early adopter, so I get super geeked about it. And I just have to remember that I actually need this technology or this concept to be adopted by the masses. And so to think about, in this health economics role that I'm in now, it helps me think about barriers to adoption, right? The term market access is not just how do I get my product registered in the market, right? Yeah. It's how do I actually access the patient? And so thinking through the terms in that book, right? Crossing the Chasm is helpful.
Great. How about you, Matt?
Yeah, so many books. It's hard to pick. I'd say one of the ones that's been pretty influential has been Outliers, Malcolm Gladwell. So if you haven't read that, check it out.
He has a great podcast too, by the way.
I'm aware of that as well. I think you asked a lot of leadership questions. I think if you want sort of a negative example of leadership, Bad Blood, currently reading that now.
Who's that?
So it's a narrative about the debacle of Silicon Valley health tech startup.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, that might be a good one.
Yeah.
Well, lessons learned one for sure. Is there anything that you guys wanted to tell me that I just didn't ask the right question?
It's been a lot of fun.
Awesome.
I didn't know it was going to be this much fun. So.
Oh, well, I'm glad. It was more fun than you thought it would be. How would you like? Do you have a call to action? You have a website you want to promote? How should people get a hold of you if they want to work in Warsaw, Indiana, or Cincinnati?
Yeah, I would say just reach out on LinkedIn.
Right.
There aren't many Rick Dittos in the world, so you should be able to find me. And I'm pretty happy to help connect people together. This was a lot of fun, Steve. Thanks for having us. And I think the key for us is like I said, I'm still fairly early in my career, right? I'm 33, so hopefully I can deliver some really cool stuff to the marketplace over the next couple of years and come back and talk about it with you.
Absolutely. You're welcome back anytime. You too, Matt.
Awesome.
Thanks. You have just experienced the life science effect. If you liked it, be sure and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. And more importantly, tell your colleagues, tell your boss, tell your friends. It'll make you look smart, and maybe it'll even get you a raise. Thanks again to our presenting sponsor, BPM Associates. Set your medical innovations in motion. BPM helps life science companies design, manage, and execute their most complex projects. What effect will you cause? Thanks to today's guest and to all of our guests. Who else should I be talking to? Send me an email at steven.vincent@bpm-associates.com. That's all for now. Thanks for listening, and go make something amazing happen.